Hello again, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar. Before we get into it, I want to introduce folks to the interpretation system that we have available in Zoom. I will put the instructions on the screen in just one moment. Tonight's webinar will be broadcast in both English and Spanish. Thank you in advance to Mercedes and to Jill for making that possible. The instructions are now on the screen. The majority of tonight's program will be in Spanish and interpreted into English. So to turn on simultaneous interpretation, you can find the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select your preferred language. We do recommend that you use the option to mute the original audio for the best audio quality. And if you're connected on your mobile phone, you may find that option under 3 dots. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas a todos a la webinar de Venezuela Solidarity Network. Vamos a usar el sistema de interpretación que está dentro de Zoom. Para activar la interpretación simultánea, busca el icono de globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de pantalla de Zoom y seleccione su idioma preferido. Si está conectada desde móvil, necesita seleccionar las opciones más para encontrar el icono de globo. Las instrucciones están en la pantalla. Gracias. Y gracias especialmente a Jill y a Mercedes para la interpretación de hoy. Today, we are joined together to discuss Trump's attacks on Venezuelan migrants and the Salvadorian President's complicity. I want to again welcome everyone to the monthly Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar and online picket, and to this important discussion today. We are honored to be joined by activists in the United States, El Salvador, and Puerto Rico, as well as North America, and especially by family members of those imprisoned by US President Trump. My name is Allison Bodine. I'm a founding member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, which is a North America-based network of organizations and individuals in solidarity with Venezuela in both Canada and the United States and internationally. And also, I am with the Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice here in Vancouver, Canada. Where I'm speaking from today is the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And if anyone else is joining from occupied Indigenous land, I invite you to post where you're joining from in the chat and acknowledge the territories on which you are also living. As we support the self-determination and sovereignty of Venezuela, we also support the self-determination and sovereignty of Indigenous peoples living in North America. Venezuelan migrants in the United States have been targeted as part of the Trump administration's brutally escalating attacks on migrants. 238 Venezuelan migrants were kidnapped from the United States and sent to the notorious CECOT torture prison in El Salvador earlier this year. 350,000 Venezuelan migrants living in the US have been stripped of their temporary protected status and are under threat of immediate deportation. Washington criminalizes migrants to justify the US hybrid war against Venezuela, when in fact, this hybrid war is the primary driver of migration. Trump's accusation that Venezuela is a, quote, narco-state, or that any of the Venezuelans kidnapped are criminals, rests on the equally false contention that migrants are criminals unleashed by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to subvert the United States, among other gross proclamations by the US State Department or US administration in regard to the kidnapping of Venezuelan migrants. Today, we are going to discuss what is behind the Trump administration's attacks on Venezuelan migrants, the complicity of the Salvadorian President Bukele, and most importantly, hear directly from human rights activists that are fighting these criminal deportations. We have an excellent panel of speakers, as well as I mentioned before, are very honored to be joined by family members of Venezuelans imprisoned in CECOT prison in El Salvador, who every day are fighting for their release, as we'll hear, whether it is from Europe, from the United States, or from Venezuela. Without further ado, I think we're ready to get started. I just wanted to mention to anyone joining that you will be invited to participate in the discussion and to ask questions, especially of our Venezuelan guests. So please, during the presentations, think of questions that you would like to ask, and hopefully we can have a discussion about building international and especially solidarity in North America with Venezuelan migrants under attack and those imprisoned and kidnapped to El Salvador. Without further ado, I'll introduce our first panelist, Vanessa Ramos. Vanessa is president of the Association of American Jurists, a member of the National Lawyers Guild, and of the Colegio de Abogados y Abogadas de Puerto Rico. Thank you, Vanessa, for joining us here today.
Thank you very much. I thank you, Allison, and I thank the interpreters, and I also thank our Venezuelan brothers and sisters, the families of the migrants. My presentation is going to be very brief because I do not want to take time away from the family members who are here, but we have to understand the background. The background is that, if I'm not mistaken, in 2001, the governments of the United States and various administrations in the United States, since then, they have been trying to produce regime change amongst the democratically elected governments of Venezuela, and they try to do so violently. And to this end, they have imposed more than 900 unilateral coercive measures. So that is the background to all of this. And then what happens when there are unilateral coercive measures or blockades? This impacts the lifestyle of people. It affects the economy, families, finances, the available resources, wages. So many things are impacted. Therefore, people exercise their human right to migrate. Some wound up here in the United States. And then what happened? Here, with the new administration, and I'm not trying to praise the previous administrations, but under the current administration, there is a project to deport migrants. Of course, to deport migrants coming from the global south, from our countries and other countries. We should just state it plainly, people from non-European countries. So these illegal unilateral coercive measures, and what is happening in this country, is a crisis in terms of the separation of powers in the US government. Allow me to explain. Executive orders are being issued. President Trump of this country simply signs these, and these get implemented with very little questioning. There has been some questioning in the courts, but when the courts issue an order to not illegally transfer people, several of these orders have been deliberately ignored by the executive branch, also represented by the Federal Department of Justice. So what do we have before us here? What we have are massive arbitrary detentions and This is not happening at the courthouse when people go to court because they have an immigration case in that court. Then what happens is that there are immigration agents waiting for them outside the courthouse, and they detain them, they send them to detention centers, and this is happening at schools and at hospitals, at any public place. So that's what's happening on the one hand. Also, something else that is happening is that they are using antiquated laws. In the case of the hundreds of Venezuelan migrants who were illegally transferred and deported to El Salvador, they used what is called the Alien Enemies Act. This is a law from 1798, which has only been applied 3 times in this country. First, with the war against England in 1812, and the second against Japanese descendants during the Second World War, and now against Venezuelan migrants. So those are the 3 cases in which this law has been invoked in over 200 years, but it's being applied illegally, even though it's antiquated. The United States they are saying that the United States is in a situation of war. And as far as we know, the US is not at war with Venezuela. And secondly, the United States has not been invaded. So that is just as to the legality of the act. And when the illegal deportation of 252 Venezuelans, one judge said that plane has to be turned back, but that judicial order was ignored. So the immigration proceedings are civilian proceedings. They are administrative. They are not criminal proceedings. And what the current administration is trying to do is to criminalize Venezuelan migrants and create a false narrative that these are people who have criminal backgrounds. Perhaps some of them do have criminal backgrounds, but even so, they have a right to a day in court and the right to be judged and enjoy the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So that's for people who may have a criminal record, but all of that was ignored. In the other case with the deportations, how are these taking place? That is a civilian proceeding that goes through the immigration administrative courts, and which can be appealed to the immigration court. It can also be appealed to the federal district court, but none of this has happened. They have simply been illegally taken, placed in a plane, and they wound up in El Salvador in one of the most notorious prisons, CECOT, in which you can find about 100,000 Salvadorans are incarcerated there, in which, for example, they do not admit observation missions. And that's just one example of the illegality. And Bukele's El Salvador, he is continuously prolonging a state of exception. And this means that people lose their constitutional rights, what they have under the Salvadoran Constitution, the right to an attorney, and so on and so forth. So all of that is in terms of the context. The other thing is that not only are they detaining Venezuelans who are undocumented, they also detained people who enjoy temporary protective status, and also people who were permanent residents or people who had other types of legal status to be in the United States. So this means that once again, they are not only violating the Constitution of the United States, but they are also violating international treaties that the United States has ratified, such as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So this is not only created fear and terror. There are parents who no longer send their children to school in the United States because they're afraid that they will be deported and the family will be separated. And this is happening more often, the separation of families, such as with the 252 Venezuelans. There are other such cases. And it continues to create an atmosphere of fear, and these also, when people show up for their administrative court appearances, they're getting arbitrarily detained. So this has led to several forms of resistance. There have been members of Congress who have tried to visit the CECOT prison. There are members of Congress from the United States that have been trying to get into the jails, particularly the federal jails that are holding migrants, and this should not be treated that way because immigration proceedings are not criminal. And in fact, several members of Congress have been arrested, such as also the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, and a mayoral candidate in New York. And so this is all of the background of the situation of the Venezuelans in El Salvador. There are 3 lines to be aware of: the international denunciations and the cases in the court in the United States, and also the pressure that can be exerted on the Salvadoran government. In terms of the United States, there are several cases that discuss the issue of not allowing flights to El Salvador or other countries. But this is a battle. It's an uphill battle because the Supreme Court of the United States gave the green light to deport migrants to the country of Sudan. And without allowing these individuals to assert their rights and demand due process. And so, because they might argue that they would be at risk of torture and other serious violations of human rights if they are sent to third countries. So there is so much here. We can't analyze all of this in just an hour, but by way of conclusion, in order to allow other people to speak, I would like to make some recommendations. I think that in the United States, we have to keep fighting, not only in court, but also in the streets.
People are speaking up. It's important to find legal help, legal aid for the people who are being detained. Also accompanying people. This is something that the comptroller in New York has done this. He's been accompanying people who are going to courts, to migration courts, so that ICE does not detain these people illegally. In order for ICE to legally detain someone, they need a warrant. And in the vast majority of cases, this is not taking place. Also, denouncing to the special rapporteurs of human rights, the work group on arbitrary detentions. Let's not forget about the special rapporteur about the rights of children. It is important to denounce there. Also putting pressure on the government, including the Salvadorian government. I'm going to leave it here so that other people can speak, and I want to give the floor to the family members of people who have been deported. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Mirelis Contreras. I am the mother of Bruce Cedeño. My son was detained and taken to Atlanta, Georgia, where he had an appointment on March 5th with a judge. He met the judge and he asked for the right to speak. He was granted it. He asked why he was there, and she said that it was because he was an illegal migrant in this country. And she asked him if he needed more time, and he said yes. She changed the appointment for April 22nd and asked him to present himself at court with his lawyer. 3 days later, he was taken to El Valle, Texas. My son, in the morning, since he has been detained, he communicated with me, but now I have not heard anything from him since March 15th. He called me and he said, they're taking us deported to Venezuela. He said, I'll see you soon. Since then, I know nothing about my son. My son is not a criminal. He does not belong to any gang. He does not have any tattoos. And even if he did have tattoos, this does not mean that he is a criminal. I'm asking all the competent authorities to help me to look, to find my son and to find proof of living, not only my son, but also I stand with all the mothers of children who were taken to El Salvador. I'm a desperate mother. My son has no criminal record. I'm one of many mothers. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Fernanda Ortega. I am the mother of Abel Ortega, who has now been kidnapped, and he is in the CECOT prison in El Salvador. Since March 15, I know nothing about my child. I demand proof of life. I need to know how he is, how his health is. My son has no criminal record. This is his criminal background. Here you can see his work permit. The competent authorities, please, I am asking you, please help us in any way possible. Thank you. I am here. There are a lot of us here. There are many of us, and we're not going to stop today more than ever. We stand strong for your children, for our children. We ask the United Nations to hear us. We've been there several times. We asked them to keep on helping us. We want to thank President Maduro. I am the father of Kevin Peñalosa. This is his record. He is not a criminal, and it has been 30 days already since they took these men, these boys to El Salvador, including my son. To this day, we know nothing about them. Good afternoon. My name is Yvonne Rivas de Benavides. I am the mother of Jonel Santiago Rivas. He is 28 years old. He lived in North Carolina. He was detained by migrations on February 8th. After that, they took him to Georgia. From Georgia, they took him to Texas to a detention center in Rio Negro. Since March 15, I have not heard anything about my son. He called me that day on March 15th and he said he was coming home. He called me. He was happy because he said they were bringing him back to Venezuela. But after that date, I have known nothing from him. On Sunday, the 16th, we learned that the plane that he was on had been redirected to El Salvador. We want justice for our children, please. They need to respect their human rights. We want to know from our son, please. We demand justice for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I apologize again for the difficulties in sharing the audio, and thank you to everyone who recorded those videos of the photos, seeing the photos of prisoners and hearing directly from families and the demand for justice for their children and for their loved ones is definitely powerful. And I'll put the links in the chat so people can continue to share those videos. There's an entire playlist of them. Now I want to invite William Kamikaro who I introduced before from the Alberto Lovera Bolivarian Circle, a Venezuelan US activist, to please tell us a little bit about the videos we've just seen and also introduce the family members of the Venezuelans incarcerated unjustly in CECOT for us here today. Thank you, William. Your camera's not on. I'm going to ask you to start your video if you can as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Alison. Yes, to us, what is happening is very, very worrisome, very concerning. What is happening with Venezuelans in this country, particularly Venezuelan immigrants. First of all, because there is a stigmatization of Venezuelan immigration. In a way, they are being dubbed as criminals, rapists, murderers, a whole set of negative adjectives that leads to them being despised, and it leads to marginalization of all Venezuelan citizens. I want to say that this is extremely serious. It's very difficult because it leads to direct and immediate discrimination of Venezuelans. In the US, this link or this association, criminal association between the US President Donald Trump and President Bukele has carried out a series of violations of human rights that are very serious. The detaining without due process of Venezuelans with no trials, with no kind of legal procedure, removing them from the country with all this stigmatization, detaining them, kidnapping them, sending them to a different country where they have never been before in El Salvador, and incarcerating them in this country where they never committed a crime because they've never been there before. This has been denounced. We have seen this also in all the newspapers, in the New York Times and the Washington Post, even in institutions like the Cato Institute, which is not very much a friend of Venezuela, but they have called this out, they have denounced this. In the case of El Salvador, it's alarming because most of the prisoners are in this maximum security prison that has been constructed with money from the US and also constructed with funds from the state of Israel. So a prison has been built there that could house 85,000 prisoners, at least, sorry, 40,000 prisoners in principle, but now it houses 85,000, so it is overpopulated. So in this situation with 85,000 prisoners, most of them are Salvadorian. There is a percentage of Colombian prisoners and other nationalities as well. But the 253 Venezuelans enter within this context of a hybrid war that the United States is imposing upon Venezuela. And we can see that within this prison, which is only 3 years old, over 410 people have died already in the prison. They have died due to physical treatment. They are very poor. They don't have a chance to drink enough water. They are being beaten as if it were a dictatorship. They are beaten in their vital organs. They compromise their vital organs, their livers, and this prison, apart from this, something that makes this much more serious and difficult for us is that in this prison, the Venezuelan government hires a lawyer or an organization of human rights called Cristosa, and they hire a very well-known lawyer, Ruth Lopez. She's a human rights lawyer in El Salvador, and soon after, she is incarcerated by the government of Bukele. So there is a persecution within this country against human rights, and the Trump administration, echoing this aggression policy against the Venezuelan people, is authorizing Venezuelan migrants as a political weapon against the Venezuelan people, and it's like another weapon against Venezuela. This is why this is so serious. Many of these videos, we asked all the members or family members of people who are incarcerated sent us these videos through their cell phones. And there are some videos that are a bit longer. They're not here. They're 15 minutes long, where they talk in more detail about what has been going on and their situation. I would like to have the possibility right now to give the floor to some of the family members who are here today, so that they can tell us about what has been going on lately and how they have presented themselves in the United Nations, also in United Nations in Venezuela, to present letters rejecting the discrimination that Venezuelans are suffering and denouncing their situation. And they have also gone to the Human Rights Commission in Europe. So maybe Mirelis, you would like to introduce yourself and you would like to tell us about this journey? Or maybe Moreno? Is Moreno here? No, not yet. Okay, so Mirelis, maybe you can start. I would like Moreno to participate, mainly to present the testimony about what we've been doing in Venezuela. And then I would also supplement in relation to what we have been doing in Geneva, in the United Nations, which is, I would say, is secondary. We started out in Venezuela. There we have Osvaldo. Osvaldo, you're here. You're in Maracaibo, right, Osvaldo?
We can't hear you, Osvaldo. Hello? Now we can hear you. Good evening. I'm sorry that I'm joining the meeting and I would love you to please catch me up to speed about what I've missed. Well, Osvaldo, says William, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you are right now and explain when you found out about the situation of your child and where your child was in the United States and how you responded to this very painful situation. All right. Again, good evening. I'm Osvaldo Moreno, and I am the father of Michael Moreno, a young man who, when he turned 16 years old, began the path to migration due to the economic problems that we were experiencing here in this country because of the sanctions imposed on us. This created a situation in which many of our youth felt the need to look for a better future and made the decision to migrate. They made this decision to leave their country of birth and their families, and they went down that torturous path, so high risky, going through the jungle and all of Central America. For example, in the case of my son, it took about 6 months to make the journey, because as he went through Central America and because of his own financial shortcomings, he had to stop and work in each country, Costa Rica, Panama, and so forth. So that is a typical experience of all of these young people. They went looking to chase their dreams despite the difficulties at home, and supposedly they did fulfill their dreams, and they reached a country which was supposed to be the country of democracy and where they could aspire to a better future. They weren't trying to hurt anyone. They went in search of a dream and also trying to help their families. because the family that was left behind in Venezuela was in a precarious situation. And so if the hope of a better future, they also wanted to send contributions to the family members that stayed in Venezuela. So this the families of these young people who migrated constitute a large segment of the Venezuelan population. So once they got to the United States, well, they weren't there for very long. These were primarily young people that had not been in the United States for very long. People say that they entered illegally, but the majority, it's not really correct that they were illegally. Almost all of them presented themselves to the immigration authorities of the United States, and they allowed them to enter, as in the case of my son. And he had regular immigration checkups, check-ins that he had to go to, and he did. He entered in Texas, and then he called his mom, who lived in Las Vegas, to go pick him up, and he got regular check-ins. And most of these young people were going to their immigration appointments, and they had permission to come in. And so it is not accurate to say that they were illegal. They were given appointments, and my son was not arrested. About the third time he had to go to a check-in, he showed up for his appointment, and they said that he had missed one of his appointments, and so they detained him in September of 2024. That's when he was detained. From then, the next check-in that he had around November, well, his mother went with him, and he had to pay a bond of $8,000. So then everything changed in January when a new president took office, and his status changed. He himself told me that the detention center had changed, and he said that they were taking him in because they suspected that he was a member of the Tren de Aragua gang. And then he said something, and I am a police officer, and I was very concerned about this. And I said, according to the law, there is no reason for him to be concerned, that he should rest at ease, because it's not true. They might say that's a psychological thing to just try to impose a psychiatric terror on you. That's what we as police say. But all of the authorities say that they're trying to threaten these young people, and they're trying to it's a psychological attack. And so don't worry, you have not committed any crime. So as a kid who might be stigmatized because he has tattoos, but that does not tell you what kind of person it is. That's just an accusation. We say, well, it's a kid who has tattoos and who had just turned 19 years old. And I told him to calm down. Over time, he got transferred to Texas. And you have to say that when that transfer, they never told his mom or anybody. We found out about it through other relatives and friends that were detained with him. The sound has stopped. Well, it would seem that Osvaldo lost his signal. And that he thought he was going to be deported to Venezuela. We thought that was strange, because it was thought that there was going to be an agreement and a deportation. And so he informed us of this on, I think, the 14th, March 14th. He told us this. And most of our discussions with the relatives have been a similar situation, that they're told their relatives that they were going to be deported to Venezuela. The authorities have told them this, and they were put on a flight here in Venezuela, most of us. And we know this is very common, and we try to verify where the flight is going to land. And by the third day, we completely lost contact with him. And then that was a Friday, and Saturday and Sunday, we began to hear on social media. His signal froze again. talking about the United States, and they have all of the technology to look at people's criminal records and see if they have a criminal past. But apparently it seems that they sent some people who they verified were criminals, but our kids weren't. And as soon as he got in touch with us, or Mexico or wherever he has gone, we've been informed, he always told us that he was fine. We did not yet believe that something so illogical or unjust or illegal could have occurred. But then we get to Monday, and we see that no planes had landed in Venezuela, but rather they landed in El Salvador. And we also saw this on social media. There was something really circus-like images coming from El Salvador when many of our relatives came out on television, outraged about the degrading treatment of these men, completely humiliated in public and labeling them as Tren Aragua criminals. This was a big media show that they put on, and a violation of the dignity of a member of our family. You can just imagine the impact that this had on so many members of our Venezuelan family. There's a narration now from a US journalist who was present there that he describes it, the terror that those young men felt at that point in time. And he described it because you can just imagine if someone who has been taken under deceit to a country they've never been to, and where it is broadly known, they've heard about this CECOT in El Salvador, whose purpose is to degrade human beings to their minimal expression, how they must have been feeling, because one of the citizens that was returned to the United States, because they sent some women who were sent back, and they said that they realized it was El Salvador because they saw a big banner that said, "Welcome to El Salvador." That's the only way they knew what country it was. And you can imagine, we'd heard about the CECOT, but we were saying, no, it's impossible that they would be sending our kids there. And that would only be with people with a criminal background, not with our innocent children. So you can imagine the despair that those kids felt. And we know that these boys they were tied with the seat belts to their seats, and they were not able to meet their basic needs. You can imagine the terror that they were feeling. And they described how they were taken down by force and with beatings. One of the members of the crew of those airplanes said, "Look, get those criminals out of here. They tried to sabotage the flight." And excuse me for saying this, if I had been there, if I had had the chance, I would have tried to subvert the flight path of that plane, because it was something inhuman that was being done. And the way that they took them off the plane, the humiliation, that did not suffice. After that, they took him to this overcrowded prison, CECOT. And then at that moment, it's been more than 100 days, which shows that this is a forced disappearance. There's no other word for it, because we know absolutely nothing about our children, and there is no legal foundation to justify the transfer of our kids. They never committed any crime in El Salvador. They never committed any crime in their country, and this ethics and dignity should have required that they not be taken there without proving these charges. And so they have is something, and as the highest representative of his country, they should have designated people to verify whether those kids actually did have any criminal background. After having been kidnapped. So this is a forced disappearance because they were denied due process and the United States did not allow them a trial. And they did not show proof of any crime they may have committed. And Venezuela, on day 3 or 4, a meeting was convened with the government, and they supported that we should designate a law firm in El Salvador to represent them in order to provide legal services to our kids in El Salvador, and they filed a writ of habeas corpus. This signal is frozen again. William is talking about the problem. So we hired someone to provide legal services to these kids, but the authorities did not allow them to have any access to the kids. There are many systematic violations taking place through this. And at this stage, in this modern day and age, I do not understand why the community of nations and organizations have not raised their voices together, because we say through all kinds of communication, through television, social networks, radio, everywhere, we have been talking about the systematic violations of human rights, and that there is a crime against humanity being committed here, because this is a group of migrants who should who deserve special treatment. We do not understand how it is possible that instead of giving them support, they have been forced to suffer greater consequences than they were already suffering. They have been living a nightmare. This is a collective tragedy, because it's not only inflicted on these kids themselves, but also the thousands of Venezuelans, family members. As a father of one of these, you can just imagine the anguish and despair that we feel, and the impotence of not being able to do anything for them. We are permitted from letting those kids exercise any right, starting with the presumption of innocence. William is speaking now. You said that you work with a police agency in Maracaibo, is that right? The excuse that they used for detaining these kids is that they are part of Tren de Aragua, and that no longer exists. I'm sorry, I did not hear you well. William is saying the excuse that the U.S. authorities are using is that these young Salvadorans were members of the Tren de Aragua gang, but I understand it no longer exists. Apparently he's still having connectivity problems. We don't have a very good connection, Oswaldo, right now. Can you hear me now? Yes, well, very, very quickly. We need to let other people in the group speak, but explain to us a little bit about Tren de Aragua. You're familiar with that, I imagine. Hello? Yes, we're still listening to you, Osvaldo. All right, we're now going to give the floor to Mireles. Mireles, could you please speak now? We'd like to hear from you. Can you hear me now, says Osvaldo? Yes, but we need to let other people speak. Do you have good signal now? All right. Then going back to the issue of Tren de Aragua. I just wanted to clarify something for you. Here in Venezuela, Tren de Aragua only existed in part of the central part of Maracaibo. It did operate there. Around the prison. You should ask someone who knows about this topic or some Venezuelans if they're transferred to Maracaibo. Here in Maracaibo, we never spoke about Tren de Aragua. You may talk about the Colombian guerrillas or something else. But Tren de Aragua only operated in a given region of Venezuela. It's totally false that it was spread throughout Venezuela. And when they did a raid on the jail, what happened? Many Venezuelan criminals migrated to other regions. That's true. They migrated to other parts of South America and they got in touch with other gangs in other countries and they operated there. But this does not mean that the United States could say that Venezuela sent a gang to the United States. That's simply an excuse. They're trying to justify this and they say, no, they're criminals proven to be members of the Tren de Aragua gang. It's as somebody who works in this knows that that is not true, and you just have to look at their fingerprints and look up their criminal record. So if they are proven criminals, and we know that Bukele and Donald Trump and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of El Salvador, they're saying that they're members of Tren de Aragua, they are proven criminals, but it's very easy to prove or disprove this. You can use their fingerprints and see what type of crimes they may have committed. But that would be very easy for Bukele to do, to leave. That would make it clear that what they're doing is illegal. No, that would put an end to the circus that they're putting on. And they're only being persecuted for their Venezuelan nationality. And they're attacking the weakest people. All right, Oswaldo, we need to let other people talk, but thank you very much. It's very clear to us that Tren de Aragua no longer exists. And when it did exist, it was in a very small part of Venezuela's geography. That is correct. Thank you very much, Osvaldo. And now we're going to give the floor to Mireles to talk a little bit about what she is doing in Europe before the United Nations Commission on Human Rights.
Hello, my name is Mireles Cacique. I'm one of the members of the Committee for the Defense of the Rights of those who have been kidnapped and are detained in El Salvador. We represent personally, of course, we should all be here representing the 253 people, but just a group of 5 people are here in representation of all the rest. We wanted to address the highest instance of human rights here in the United Nations directly. So we are looking for answers, we're looking for support, because in Venezuela we have been everywhere. We went to the United Nations in Venezuela. We asked for Walter Commissioner to make a statement, and he didn't. But the thing is, here we cannot wait for the slow times of legal processes now. We need to defend human rights in cases of arbitrary detentions and forced disappearance. It has been 102 days already. We have not heard the voices of our family members. We do not know their physical or mental conditions, the conditions that they are in. It is very important to stress this because they were deceived. They were taken to El Salvador deceived. And it's a huge emotional shock to anybody to be deceived in this way and now finding themselves in a detainment center, in a prison, charged with a crime that they have really no idea about. They don't know what they are being charged with, what they're being accused of. If we look for a legal basis for this, we're not going to find it. They are in a land they have never been before. They have never been in Salvador. They're, in some cases, maybe some of them have tattoos. Like my son, he was targeted, he was labeled because of a tattoo, but there are other cases where they don't even have tattoos. None of them have gone through any due process in terms of any federal crime. If they were to be deported, they had to be deported. They should have been deported to Venezuela. As good listeners, we can say that this was communicated to us on March 15th. They said that they were coming to Venezuela. The process, but the deception was such. They said they were going to come to Venezuela and they gave them their belongings, but they were completely deceived and they were disappeared from the system. They were taken from the US and they were taken to El Salvador. But how are they there? They they are kidnapped in El Salvador. They are not detained. They are kidnapped. The president of El Salvador laughs at due processes. He laughs at any legal procedure. He asked for a swap. He wanted to normalize the commercialization of human life, and he wanted to do a human swap. Uh, but who's going to stop these people? We are here. We are here in Geneva. We made a huge effort to be here. We are accompanied by NGOs. We are getting support from many, many people. We want to be heard. We want to be heard. We are knocking on different doors. We are knocking on all doors for legal support. We are giving our testimonies, not only ours, but everybody's in a collective way, because there are certain cases that need immediate attention. Of course, we all want our our family members to be liberated. We're talking about liberating those people who are kidnapped. But there are some complex cases within all these cases. There are elder people. There are people who attempted suicide. There is a young man, 28 years old, who actually took his life. And the elders, their health is compromised. This is an emergency. This is a situation of a crisis. So we came here to the United Nations. We knocked on doors in the central headquarters, in the headquarters of the United Nations. We need to be heard. And we have been well received in some cases, but we would like things to be speedier. This is an emergency. This is not about protocols or requirements or sheets of paper. We have shown that these are people who have been, whose rights have been violated, and we need things to be hastier. We need them to be faster. We need the world to also accompany us with this. So this is our objective, our aim. We continue to knock on doors, we leave documents, and hopefully in one way or the other, with this international pressure, we want international law to be restored. Also, we want our nationality to be respected, because this is a xenophobic persecution and it's a disrespect to our nation. They are making fun of us because they don't like our president, but this is our president, and this is not about politics. We are victims, but as victims, we are trying to be heard. We are struggling to be heard. But yes, the regular channels in our country, this is how they are. They're going to make us disappear. We're not going to, they're not going to hear us. They're going to silence us. But no, we will not let that happen. We don't want any more complicit silences. We need immediate responses. So thank you. Thank you all for being here, for hearing us out. Thank you for your patience, for your desire to help us, for your empathy. Help us replicate our voices. I would also like for Carlene to speak here. She's also in Geneva. Mr. Tito is also here from Venezuela. I know that we need to speak fast, but we have many things to say. All of us have things to say. Angie Rio also, her husband has been detained, and she is an American citizen, and she also has a perspective of her own to contribute. Thank you, Mirelis. Uh, we're going to give the floor now to Angie. Angie, if you can turn your camera on. Where are you, Angie? We can't hear you. We know that she is here. She's in the meeting. Angie, and you also mentioned Carlene. Carlene, yes, we have Mrs. Carlene there. There's Angie as well. Okay. Carlene, welcome. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about the case of your son? Are you also in Europe in the Human Rights Commission? Are you asking Angie or Carlene? I'm Angie. I'm in the US and my husband is there. Okay, Angie, go ahead. I'm here in El Paso, Texas, in the US. I met my husband in 2024. We got married. I met him in 2023 and we got married in September 2024. And he was taken. The same story as everybody else on March 15th. They came to our house to get him on February 1st. I don't know what he's being charged with. We don't know what anybody is being charged with. They didn't tell us anything. They just took them. They took them without telling us why. When they detained him at home, I asked ICE, why were they taking him in English? And they said that it didn't matter, that it was an immigration case. My husband did have final deportation, but they shouldn't have taken him because I I was working on his papers, all his papers. I filed all his papers, his work permit and other documentation, and that all of that was still pending. But I don't know what I can tell you about my story. My story is the same as everybody else. My husband is innocent. He has a rose tattoo on his neck, and he was accused of being part of El Tren de Aragua. And how long had he been in the US? He entered the US in July 9th, 2023. He was taken to CECOT in March this year, 2025. And his case is the same as the other ones. Yes, they knocked on your door and he was taken. Yeah, we were going to do laundry and he was taking laundry to our car. And when I thought, okay, he's taking a long time, and when I looked out the window, they were putting him into a black truck. And I went outside and I yelled at the ICE people saying, why are you taking him? They were putting him in the truck already. And the ICE man told me, he said, he has an arrest warrant. And I said, let me see it. And what is this arrest for? And he yelled, it doesn't matter. because this is an immigration case. And I said, but it still matters. I want to know. And he said, well, once we get to the station, I'm going to allow him to call you. And he did call me about 15 minutes later, and he said, I'm here. And I said, why am I in final deportation? And I said, but they shouldn't have taken you like that. And they took him to New Mexico. He was there for 5 weeks. And I sent certified letters with all my paperwork that was pending, all the paperwork that was pending in relation to his status. When you send a certified letter here in the US, they give you a receipt for reception of these letters. And I never got anything back. When I checked in the post office system on the internet, it said that the papers had been filed, but I should have seen a receipt for that, and I don't see a receipt for all those papers that were received, and that's very strange. I sent all of that 1 week before they took him out of New Mexico because I already suspected. I have been trained in criminal justice. I was a lieutenant in the military. I have been trained. I know how the systems work here. And when I started seeing that Bukele and Marco Rubio had met in El Salvador, I started telling my husband, we have to leave. Things are going to get ugly. But he didn't want to. I wanted to take him to Mexico, to Juarez, which is a border here very close by. He didn't want to. He didn't believe me. He thought I was exaggerating. I know what my country is capable of doing because it's not the first time that they do something as ugly as this. So I knew, I was afraid. I knew that something was going to happen, but I never thought it would be something like this. But then when I saw Marco Rubio and Bukele, I told my husband, look, they're threatening that they're going to take them over there. So 1 week before he was taken, I sent out all the papers, I filed everything. I know that they got all my papers, but I never got a response. And on March 15th in the morning, he said, they're taking me to the plane. I'm going back to Venezuela because I have my final deportation. I said, okay, don't worry. I'll go to Colombia in a couple of months and we'll see you until they fix your I-130. And once your I-130 is fixed, then you can come back here because that's happened before. People have been deported, but when they're able to arrange their papers and their documents and everything, they can come back. But I realized when I saw those videos that Bukele, rolled out, and the more recent video of Matt Gaetz, where they were all there. I saw my husband for the first time in the Matt Gaetz video. I only had the list before that. That I saw my husband's name on a list, but I didn't have confirmation. But when I saw the Matt Gaetz video, I saw him there. He was there. He's the one that is screaming liberty. Okay, Angie. We're going to continue following up on this, and we're going to see how we can organize and mobilize more people so that this is the case of the Venezuelans who have been kidnapped becomes better known and is known by more people. It's obvious that all of this is political. It's obvious. None of them have criminal records. It doesn't matter. Their criminal records don't matter. If they're Tren de Aragua, the tattoos, none of that matters. It's just political. We've been saying that from the beginning. Okay, we're going to give the floor now to Carlin. Carlin is there? Carlin, are you able to speak? Can you hear us? Good evening. My name is Carlin Fuentes. I am the mother of John Suarez. My son is 23 years old. I am part of this committee. I am struggling here in representation of the 252. We are desperate. It's been 102 days already. And I also wanted to say something about my history. Not all histories are the same. My son was detained in Pennsylvania. First, he was detained by ICE in New York. They took him to Pennsylvania and then to Texas. That's where we get a call on the 15th. And in relation to what these people have lived, I want to ask for more help. It is very depressing to see when the congressman went to El Salvador. We have been asking to know who are actually there. When I find out about my son, it was because there was a list that was rolled out. So when the congressman shows these images, it was very painful. They were doing this with their hands. They were signing this. And I never saw my son there. I haven't seen my son there. Many mothers were able to see their sons in the videos. They were able to see when they shaved their heads. But we as family members were going through trauma. So you can only imagine what they are living through there. I have 4 children. I have a 15-year-old daughter as well. And my son that has been detained is my second son. And my 15-year-old daughter, she has become depressed. She has cut herself. She has been harming herself. She is really depressed. She's desperate because at the beginning, I couldn't control myself. I was crying, but now because I want to see my son again, I've been able to find strength. I want to continue this struggle. I want to be a spokesperson for the world at large and also for God. We want to be heard. This is a cry for help. This is not like many people think that we can wait. We don't have time. If we wait longer, we can lose more lives, and this is what we don't want. They are violating all their human rights and ours as well. Why do I say ours? Because the President Bukele has not issued a list of everybody there and has not told us why they are there. We don't know the processes that have led them there. There have been no court processes. My son called me 3 days before going to El Salvador, and he said, they put me in a red suit. And what does that mean? That means they're calling me a terrorist. I'm scared. Before that, my son was in Pennsylvania with a yellow suit. What does that mean? If they capture them because they are criminals, as they say, what happens with these uniforms? Their rights are being violated. They change their uniforms. What are we going to wait for? What else are we waiting for?
William speaking. I wonder whether one of the comrades here could ask you a question. I wonder if anyone would like to ask a question. Some of the people who are with us here. Maybe one of you would like to speak to one of these parents. Well, then let me ask the Venezuelans. What would you like, you Venezuelan parents, what would you like the people in the United States to do on behalf of your incarcerated children? Osvaldo, I would say that our request of the people of the United States and also people of El Salvador and the whole world it's a matter of consciousness raising. We have to understand their dignity, and as time goes by, they've been traumatized, and as more time goes by, that damage is getting more pronounced. As someone, if there is no exemplary punishment meted out, then it might encourage the country, any authoritarian president, to build concentration camps and to do it as a money, as a profit-making scheme to take in prisoners from other countries. So it is urgent for you to act, for the whole world to make this issue visible and take action through human rights organizations and various organizations of the United Nations. No matter how much you might have a friendship or interest with these countries, it is impossible to cover the sun with your thumb. You have to look at this flagrant and systematic violation of human rights that our children have suffered. How is it possible for a president, no matter how powerful he is, to allow more than 250 people in one cell and not even allow them to lie down or sit down? What criminal? What horrible criminal gets denied the right to allow his mother or father to see that he's alive? This in and of itself is a crime. Their rights, the presumption of innocence, have all been violated. So they just want the world and to forget about them, because it's already been 100 days and see what's happened. Given the impotence of the world, they remain silent, and the powerful simply ignore us. They try to ignore us, but out of our anguish, despair, and pain, we are asking you, please, where is the awareness? Where is the sensitivity? You have to do something about this. First of all, we have to look at it systematically. No, these kids are not commodities. They can't stay there for a long time. These are human lives, and these are kids whose quality of life is going down and down, and now the despair. If those of us who are on the outside are in such despair, can you imagine about the ones who are locked up with no hope because they don't know whether someday they'll be able to see their families again? Just imagine the psychological impact and anguish they must be going through. If we are feeling such despair, what must those kids be feeling? This is an emergency. It is urgent. Please, for humanity, that is what we want to tell the world. Please, you're also parents. You also have children and families. And those kids are human beings. Please. Thank you, Osvaldo, says William. We have Mari Carmen here, who has raised her hand. Mari Carmen, would you like to speak? Yes. Hello and good evening. I am a Salvadoran. I've been here with tears in my eyes, feeling such shame about what my country is doing to our Venezuelan brothers and sisters. Not all Salvadorans support that unconstitutional government that is in power thanks to fraud. They are there because Trump is supporting him. And I've always said that we don't know if it's just a matter of money with that to prison. But the U.S. gave him money to build that prison. I'm a member of the FMLN political party, and we have issued communiques And our committees have been denouncing these acts of abuse and injustice being committed against our Venezuelan brothers. The fact is that I am indignant and very sad, and I ask forgiveness of my Venezuelan brothers and sisters. Please forgive us, because as a Salvadoran, a mother and a daughter, I am ashamed of what this president is doing. And he's not our president. His term ended over a year ago, and he's still in office. He's in there by force. He has imposed himself to continue in office. But as I was telling you, I beg you for forgiveness and promise you that I will continue to fight for justice for your children. Thank you, Mari Carmen, calling in from Canada. Who would like to speak or ask a question? Please raise your hand. I think that Angie has a question or a comment. Angie Rios. Or does anyone else have a comment? Yes, I wanted to ask what plan you have, because here in the United States, we do have a lot of support. There are several organizations that are helping us. I have tried to get in touch with my member of Congress to help me. So my congresswoman, as my representative, she needs to move to push the federal government to do its job when a citizen brings a situation like this. If I want information, for example, why did they take my husband away? What are the charges? And as a citizen, I have the right to activate my congressperson and get her to move and do something. She has not ignored me. She always answers, picks up the phone and responds to my emails, but she's not doing anything. I see that it's like a dance, and I'm upset because my husband was taken away on March 15th. I got in touch with her on March 17th, and she keeps saying, okay. And she has not done this. And the next thing, our next move is going to be to go to Congress. And we hope that we can do this with the assistance of human rights organizations here in the United States. William is speaking. In El Paso, Texas, there's someone named Carlos Merentes. He runs an organization for farm workers, and he's helping people in situations similar to the one we're describing here today, and you could get in touch with him to see if anything can be done. Well, I feel like there are very few citizens going through this. In this situation of the Venezuelans, it's just me and another woman in New York. And so we want to say our government is doing this to us, and they ignore us. And that's not right, because as citizens, that's what the Constitution says, that they have to answer to us. William says, I think that's a great idea. And this has been a mechanism to connect people. I didn't know that there was anyone here. So let's try to work together and help you make connections. As I said, Carlos Merente works with a migrant farm workers organization in El Paso, Texas. In addition, he's also part of La Via Campesina, which is an international peasants organization. And he also works closely with migrant Mexican farm workers in the region. He's a very skillful, knowledgeable person, so I can put you in touch with him. But also, let's see whether someone from the National Lawyers Guild might be in that area. and who out of the American Association of Jurists can we could connect you with in order to strengthen this work, and have been organizing protests in different parts of the United States in defense of the Venezuelan migrants who have been unjustly incarcerated in El Salvador. I see, have someone else who wants to ask a question? Mireles, did you want to say something?
Carlene.
Who
Carlene.
had their hand raised?
Carlene.
Oh, no, Carlene. Now that you asked about the members of Congress, we should say more and more days are going by and we are in despair. And I also, my daughter is very much impacted by this, and there are many other people like her. William is saying, excuse me, you're talking about a Venezuelan, and she's been left with 2 children. Of course, she's afraid. I want to bring her back to Venezuela because, first of all, she can't work. She's too afraid to go to work. And I know there are many Venezuelans in the same situation. They're afraid of what's happening in the United States. And in terms of Congress, we need more support because we're living with such uncertainty every day, and we feel like we are in the hands of God. But also, I don't think any mother could withstand the pain that we're living through every day. This has to stop. Otherwise, it's not just going to be Venezuelan moms. It's going to be many more. This cannot continue. This is a tremendous injustice. It is horrible. And as our comrade said here, if you can imagine those of us on the outsiders feeling such despair and depression, I cannot imagine how our kids who are on the inside are feeling, because they know their family members. It's not just one person, the whole family feels this. Like there's a kid who's just been operated on, and he just was operated on, so he's not getting the medicine he needs. And so people like say, no, that person didn't go, he just died there, nobody told you. Then how can we find out what happened? The more time that goes by, the greater our anguish, because we are afraid of not knowing what is really happening inside that prison. And we don't want any family members to have to live through this. All right, says William, we're trying to wrap up right now, but I want to tell you that for us, it is very important for there to be a process of feedback. And we want to know about those cases of Venezuelan mothers whose husband was abducted and they have their children there. And Diosdado Cabello from Venezuela has said 3 times on his TV program that there are more than 300 children who have been kidnapped in the United States. That's very serious. As out of these 600, I think he said about 4. They've returned only about 4, so it's an insignificant percentage. And so at any rate, we should organize ourselves and create a team to follow up not only on the 252 Venezuelans who are incarcerated in El Salvador, but also the Venezuelan mothers who've had their spouses kidnapped and they're left alone. And if they are are they undocumented, they'd like to return to Venezuela and they're afraid. We'd also like to know about the children who are still in the United States, whose fathers were abducted and sent to El Salvador or Venezuela. That information is vital in order to follow up on this and see how we can provide support. So with that, I think we need to close the webinar. We want to thank all of you. We know this is very painful for all of you and an extremely difficult situation. really for all of us who have been listening here, but particularly for all of you family members. And we want to thank everyone who has been with us tonight, listening in. I think that starting now, we should organize a team that works exclusively on the situation of Venezuelan migrants. And as we said before, we should try to work on those who are incarcerated in El Salvador, and also the mothers left without spouses here in the United States, and also the children who have been kidnapped. So thank you to Allison, Michelle, and everyone else Jill and Mercedes for interpreting. Thank you everyone for being with us.
William, for helping to put the webinar together. The Venezuela Solidarity Network organizes monthly webinars, and we very much wanted this one to be an opportunity to meet virtually but face-to-face with the family members of Venezuelan migrants who've been unjustly kidnapped to CECOT prison, to help hopefully build from here a stronger movement in solidarity with your struggle. And in a minute, I will invite everyone that's with us here today, that is still with us here to the end, to turn on their cameras so you can see each other face to face. I know some people in the chat have offered their direct support, ideas about accompanying you to Congress, about helping appeal to Congress people, but also, as William said, sign-on letters, street actions. There's much more that we must do to defend the human rights of Venezuelan migrants, and especially those imprisoned in CECOT. And I have a few announcements, including one that is especially important as a discussion, or as an extension, excuse me, of our discussion today. But I also wanted to put in the chat two resources, one of which is an article recently written by William Kamacaro about migration as a political weapon. It shares important information about CECOT, about Venezuelan migrants being one of tens of thousands of people, or hundreds of tens of thousands of people that are imprisoned in CECOT prison, what that prison means. Also includes text of a letter delivered by some of the family members we've heard from today to the United Nations on behalf of their loved ones that are imprisoned, that can be shared and should be shared around more and more. The Venezuela Solidarity Network also wrote a statement against Trump's attacks on Venezuelan migrants when they were first arrested and kidnapped to El Salvador. That statement is in the chat. If folks could please help us share that as well. Basically, getting involved in the Venezuela Solidarity Network is my appeal to all of you, so that we can build this campaign in order to build support for Venezuelan migrants who are under attack in Trump's war against all migrants, in Trump's hybrid war, as it's called, war of sanctions, of intervention against the self-determination and sovereignty of the people of Venezuela, against the democratically elected government of President Nicolas Maduro. And that is why the Venezuela Solidarity Network has come together, because attacks on Venezuelan migrants, the heartfelt stories that we've heard today, I'm sure all of us have, tears in our eyes and a commitment in our hearts to keep up with this struggle. We really must carry this forward into building a stronger movement against the US government's brutal attacks against Venezuela, because this is all connected, and because it is our responsibility, especially as people living here in North America, to do so. I know many folks that would like to have been here today are active in the streets, especially at this time, against US-Israeli genocide and war, escalated attacks against Iran, against the people of Gaza. But all of these struggles are connected, and we must work to make the issue of Venezuelan migrants and their basic human rights part of our ongoing work against war and for social justice. So thank you everyone for joining here today. There are two events that I wanted to announce today. that are supported by the Venezuela Solidarity Network, and folks are encouraged to register and join. I will put the information to join in the chat. The first is a webinar taking place on Sunday, June 29th, about the election that recently took place of governors and of parliament in Venezuela. It's going to include eyewitness reports, including from myself, but also other international observers and people within Venezuela. And I will put the information to register in the chat. It is organized by the International Manifesto Group and co-sponsored by Orinoco Tribune, Venezuela Analysis, Causa News, Mission Verdad, Venezuela Solidarity Campaign in the UK, and the Venezuela Solidarity Network. Then there is another important webinar taking place Monday, June 30th, which is an extension of the discussion we've had here today regarding U.S. intervention and Salvadoran resistance from Arena to Bukele, and that is organized by Friends of Latin America. This webinar will also be in English and Spanish Monday, June 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 4 p.m. Pacific Time. I'll put the information for that in the chat, but it includes many voices direct from El Salvador, including those who are fighting against Trump's kidnapping of Venezuelan migrants and the CECOT prison. So those links to join will be in the chat in just 1 second, and I encourage people to share and join those as well. Oh, and Jill put one in the chat already. Thank you, Jill. To close off today's webinar, I want to thank Vanessa Ramos, who had to leave early, but is president of the American Association of Jurists, who spoke here today, as well as all of the Venezuelan family members who were able to join us today: Miralis, Angie, Carlene, Moreno, and Angel, who had to leave a bit early. As I promised, let's take a second to go ahead and share our faces with everyone here today. If people would like to join, the Venezuela Solidarity Network has continued with kind of inviting people at the end to turn on their cameras to say hello. I know that some people may be joining from work or from Australia, for example, where I think it is very early in the morning. But if you would like to turn on your cameras and say hello and a quick chant together, I have sent everyone, I think, an invitation to do so. It's just nice to see each other and commit ourselves to fighting with and in solidarity with the Venezuelan families that we've heard from here today. If you didn't receive an invitation or you missed it, go ahead and feel free to raise your hand. And once again, thank you everyone for joining. The next Venezuela Solidarity Network monthly webinar is on your calendars. Will be Tuesday, July 29th, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we are screening the film How Venezuela Moved a Mountain by Thierry Duron, having a discussion with the director. Also to say a big thank you to Mercedes and to Mercedes and to Jill for their interpretation here today. It's really been excellent and critical to our ability to share with one another here today. So let's express our solidarity with Venezuelan migrants, solidarity with Venezuelan migrants under attack, and say U.S. Ooh, my filter's on. Excuse me 1 second. I have a sign here. U.S. hands off Venezuela.
U.S. hands off Venezuela.
U.S. hands off
Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
U.S. hands off Venezuela.
U.S. hands off Venezuela.
There we are. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you tonight. Thank you again to Michelle for helping with the tech here tonight, and to everyone for participating, to William for helping with the hosting. Let's continue this struggle, and we will see you at future events. We'll leave the chat open for a second just so people can copy those links. I just put them there, and we will see you all at the next Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar, if not before. That's on Tuesday, July 29th. Un abrazo fuerte, venceremos. We will win.
Venceremos.